Welcome to episode 102 of Project Geekology. This week we are going to be covering part 1 of season 2 of Rings of Power. This is a little bit of a Rings of Power series that we've been doing. I am one half of your host, Anthony, and joining me as always is...
Dakota and Eagles, Uruks, and Ents. Oh my, we have so much to talk about.
Yeah, we do.
When it comes to these first 4 episodes, and I'm super thrilled that we stuck it out and actually made it to season 2 because this is the show I wanted. This is the show that I was expecting when season 1 came out. So I'm happy that we stuck it out. Rich, I'm happy that you encouraged us to stick it out. Oh yeah, Rich, you're here too. Hi, Rich. How are you?
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks for having me. Really excited, to once again represent the rights of all Uruks out there, and I will be speaking about that later. But no, really, I'm really glad you guys stuck it out. I mean, I had a blast talking about season 1 with you guys, but like this is the moment I've been waiting for, right? Like they gave us so much.
Yes. So kind of like the last season. Part 1 is going to cover the first 4 episodes of the series, so we're not going to be talking about the entire season today. And then next week we will be talking about the rest of, the last 4 episodes, and then I guess maybe the season as a whole. And yeah, there's definitely a lot to talk and unpack, which is like, I'm glad that we cut this show in half, because there's no way that, like, even just in the first 4 episodes, that we could have just covered this in like a 1 hour episode, just like the whole season. So I'm really excited about that. What have you been up to, Dakota? I know that we usually start the show with what we have been up to, so tell us.
Not a whole lot as far as just consuming entertainment outside of Rings of Power, but, well, actually that's not entirely true. But I have been playing Astro Bot, which is the
game?
PlayStation. Yeah, the game Astro Bot on PlayStation 5.
Nice.
Have you given it a chance yet?
I actually have not, but I heard that it's actually like a really, really good like platformer game.
I'm super impressed with it. It's basically PlayStation's Mario. It's a Super Mario game. You kind of think like one of the more recent Mario games that have come out, and kind of like Odyssey or Galaxy or something like that, where it's like kind of semi-open world, even though there's levels to each location. And what's cool about Astro Bot is it's very clearly a love letter to PlayStation games of the past. So there's a good chunk of levels that are themed to games that have been popular. Like we just went through a God of War level where we had to collect certain bots, and we found a Kratos and Atreus, and we had to go through certain themed locations that were very God of War-esque. But there's a lot of like really creative gameplay mechanics, and there's so much within the controller that the PlayStation has, like in terms of it produces audio, it accepts different types of movement and stuff that is very uniquely represented in this game, and each level has a different mechanic that you can utilize with the DualShock controller, and it's just so cool.
Right. What Dakota is talking about is the actual like Astro Bot game. When the PS5 came out, there was this Astro Bot game that came out, but it was more of like a showcase for the PS5 and
I think
the
it was like Astro's
controller.
World or something like that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it's almost like that character kind of became a little bit of like a mascot for the PS5, just to kind of showcase what you can do with this hardware. And when that game came out, like I saw nothing but rave reviews for it. I had listened to a couple of podcasts that talked about it, and pretty much like I would say, all of them are like, this is like such a good platformer. It's so solid. So I'm interested in
it's also a contender for Game of the Year. I don't know if you've looked at the Game of the Year list yet, but it's like a really bizarre list. Like there's a
probably Rebirth's on there.
Yeah, it's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Yeah.
There's what's weird is that it's not a full game, it's the DLC. So Elden Ring's latest DLC is in contention for Game of the Year, which is bizarre. Astro Bot is in contention for Game of the Year, and I feel like there's a couple more, but I'm not in that sphere, so I don't know for sure.
There's usually maybe about like
5 or 6, right?
to 6, yeah.
But I'm really impressed with it. As far as anything else I've been up to, I was talking to Rich right before we started recording. There's a lot of Avatar news that has come out in the past 2 days. And some of it is rather spoilery. I don't think I'm going to talk too much about all that. But if you're interested, there has been a lot of leaks regarding the Avatar series that occurs after The Legend of Korra. So this is the next Avatar.
Okay.
The Earth Avatar. So there's been a lot of leaks within the past 2 days that have come out. The Avatar's name has been released, the premise and the setting, and it's really fascinating. But it's like a huge status quo change. So look at that at your own peril. But as far as stuff that's not so spoilery, Avatar Studios has, on top of all these leaks that have been coming out outside of Avatar Studios released their official timeline
nice.
of the Avatar show and everything. And I'm pleased to announce the timeline structure that I came up with last week, where I mentioned that Avatar 1, like when he became the Avatar, is the new 0 period, and like by the time the second harmonic convergence with Korra comes out is 10,000 years in the future. That's exactly the layout that they chose. It may not be ER, era of Rava, and EA, era of the Avatar, but the numbering system is on par with what I've got going on. So I'm very pleased with that. I kind of called it. I kind of just wish I had released my Avatar timeline earlier so that I could have
You could have been like, hey, they copied me.
Yeah, they copied me. But now I feel like I copied them, and it's not the case. But yeah, anyway, I've got it on recording.
That's cool.
It was on our last episode. If you want to check it out, yeah, I definitely talked about that. So I'm pleased, but also kind of like a little bit upset. But with that timeline, they released new information, like between the first Avatar and Yang Chen, which is the air Avatar in the cycle prior to Aang. There are 90 avatars. That's the first time that they've ever announced, they said over 90 avatars, which means that we're coming up on 100 total avatars once the next Avatar comes out. So I'm excited about that. It's really cool. A lot of stuff's coming out. Also, I think we're probably going to have to talk a little bit about this just in general, just Skeleton Crew.
Honestly, to tell you the truth, I have not been able to actually sit down and watch the 2 episodes. I went to every time I go to like sit down to like watch it at night, because like the past couple of nights I've been like sitting down and watching this first part of season 2. By the time I've just been exhausted lately, so by the time I go to sit down and watch it, dude, like I'm knocking out. And so like I'm like, okay, I don't want to watch this because I want to watch it without falling asleep.
Of course, yeah.
I really want to watch it. Like I've seen like maybe the first like 20 minutes of the first episode, and so far it seems pretty interesting. Like I like that it seems like they're trying to do something different.
There's a certain level of mystery within the show that I'm really excited about. Rich, I feel like you have something to say about Skeleton Crew.
Oh, I absolutely love it. I mean, it's kind of like Goonies in space. A
little bit, yeah. I mean, they kind of give you that suburban lifestyle within the Star Wars universe that we've never seen before.
Yeah, it's awesome.
We've never seen that in 40-something years, and that's really cool.
It's like we've seen dusty deserts or like an overcrowded city, and that's it.
Now that you mention it, I did find that kind of interesting that like they are living, the lives that they're living is very different than what we're used to in Star Wars.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, the dynamic shift. But you obviously, like if you think about it, suburbs have to exist somewhere. Yeah. So might as well exist in this show. And I like how the kids are very clearly like from affluent neighborhoods, and like they're giving the parents are giving their kids the best possible education that they can, and it kind of just mirrors our personal lives a little bit, in the sense that we've all been to school, we've all had to take tests that, test our aptitude for certain things. So I think it's just a really fun twist on the genre by incorporating a little bit of real life into it.
Right, and it definitely has like those coming of age elements. That's what's going to be happening in that show. And something that it kind of reminds me a little bit of is that there's a series that I really enjoyed in middle school, and it was called Star Wars Galaxy of Fear, and it was Goosebumps in the Star Wars universe, and it followed these two kids and their uncle was like pretty much like a Jedi. And so it's kind of reminding me like you've got this group of kids that's following this like Jedi kind of character, so like that it brought that memory to me a little bit. So that's
cool.
Yeah, I can't wait to actually like dive and watch a little bit more.
It was funny. I watched the first episode, and then I texted Jen and I complained about something. I think I said I need Dakota to make a timeline so that I know what the hell is going on. And then I kind of was like, "Oh, you just need to be patient, buddy. Like you just need to be patient."
You want to know
Dakota timelines?
I could give you a brief little timeline. There's information that I've already gleaned from the timeline that I think kind of spoils certain aspects of the show. So I don't want to get too deep into it, but it is concurrent to Mandalorian and Boba Fett and all that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's after episode 6, before episode 7.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's about 5 years after episode 6.
Okay.
In that sweet spot.
In that sweet spot where there's very little canon stuff that we know about outside of the shows. But what I find really interesting, Anthony, when you eventually sit down to watch the episodes for the first time, I guess.
I'm going to tackle at least the first episode tonight after recording, because I didn't have enough time to eat before we recorded. So I'm going to eat after we record and be able to actually sit down and like eat and be able to like watch something. I won't be like laying down and watching something, so I won't be able to fall asleep.
In the beginning scene, notice what the pirate holds when he picks up a New Republic credit.
Okay.
And then I think by episode 2, notice what one of the kids is holding when they give over their credits, because they're not the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big clue as to where they are in the universe, their home planet and all that. And I think, if you give it any thought, you can kind of come up with a decent understanding of like what is actually going on with these kids, because there's more than meets the eye, because they're not the same credits that the pirate finds in the beginning, as well as what the kid is, carrying. So really interesting stuff.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll keep an eye out.
Anthony, what have you been up to?
So the whole reason why we didn't record and get an episode out the previous week as this comes out is because I went out of town and I got to spend some time with some family for Thanksgiving. And after that, this past weekend, I went to Disney. We went to Hollywood Studios. I always like going to Hollywood Studios. And so did that. And then I actually, yesterday, as of recording, we're recording on Wednesday. So yesterday, December 3rd, I went to go see Moana 2.
Oh, yeah, I got to see that as well. Really quick, what are your favorite and least favorite rides in Hollywood Studios? Or you don't have to tell me least favorite. You just, what are your like top 3?
So my top 3, I mean, obviously Rise of the Resistance, just because like that technology was just, it's amazing. And they used that same like technology for that Mickey and Minnie ride that they made. So
it's a trackless
ride, yeah, which I think is amazing that we're like at that point. Another one that it's tough because there's a lot that I do like, but I have to go with the classics like Rock and Roller Coaster, like just the dark indoor coaster. It's really fun, but also kind of scary at the same time because there's a couple of times where you feel like your head's gonna hit something, but like you know that they've like calculated that, but like
of course,
you still have that like inkling to like wanna kind of duck.
Like cringe or same with like Space Mountain. Like you can't see anything that's like above or beside you, but like if you like hold your arms up in this in the air, you're kind of worried that they're just gonna like be hit off of your own arm.
Dude, exactly.
So I don't know if you've noticed, or I don't know if you know this, but Rock and Roller Coaster is going away in its current state.
So I didn't. I mean, I haven't really dug too deep into that, like, so I didn't know. But I know that the Muppets ride is going away in its current state. That's changing.
Yes, so the Muppets 3D show is going away, which, you know, a lot of people are really upset about because that's Jim Henson's last actual film was that show for Disney World. So that's supposed to be, they're going to keep that in some form or another. But the Muppets are going to be replacing the Aerosmith show in Rock and Roller Coaster. So it's going to be a Muppets themed roller coaster instead of Aerosmith.
Oh, okay. I wonder what did they say the reasoning behind that? I guess because like Aerosmith.
Well, I mean, Aerosmith has fallen out of public like consciousness at this point, right? I mean,
public consciousness. I mean, there's been allegations against Steven Tyler that aren't very Disney friendly.
Fairly certain he sang about them, so I don't know why we're surprised, but.
Yeah, but again,
makes sense.
Yeah, right.
It's in the music, guys.
We also have they want to incorporate a Monsters Inc. land and roller coaster where the Muppets land is currently. Okay. So they're gonna gut the Muppets land, put all the Monsters Inc. stuff there, and then they're gonna ship the Muppets somewhere else. I don't know.
And then also, I really like Tower of Terror, just because
Tower of Terror is fantastic.
You know, I like the Twilight Zone. I like the Outer Limits. I mean, like, dude, you know, like as a kid, like I loved those really creepy like anthology series that like really tested thinking and stuff. So
sure,
yeah. So it definitely has that vibe, and that's one of my favorite rides. And that honestly, that's probably one of the few actual drop rides that I'll go on. It's because it's not that bad. I will never go on Doctor Doom's Fearfall. Never in my life. You will never see me even put a toe on that ride. But
all right, well, you heard
Tower of Terror. Tower of Terror, I'll go on there.
Tower of Terror is fantastic. It's one of those classic rides that I hope never changes. I know in Disneyland they've already rethemed it to a Guardians of the Galaxy ride, and everyone hates it. So I hope they don't do that for Disney World. But anyway,
right. But yeah, so yeah, no, I got to, I was, you know, going to visit some family that I hadn't seen in a while was good, and then, you know, getting out to Disney and seeing Moana and watching this. So,
Rich, what have you been up to?
Well, let's see. Pokemon has come to a grinding halt, where since I refuse to pay money, I've gotten past the barrier, and I'm very displeased. So I just turned to an old favorite, Red Dead Redemption 2. I think at this point, I probably play it once every 18 months or so. Like I'm just like I've replayed the entire thing. I still get upset at the same moments. I did find out new stuff. Like you don't have to go get Micah and help him get back to camp right away. You can just kind of like not have him around. And I hate his character, so I thoroughly enjoyed looking at my map and seeing his name on my map and saying, heck no, I'm not going to go help you, Micah, because I didn't want him around the camp. It's just, he annoys the crap out of me. My wife walked in the other day, and I was fishing, and the fish was very large. It was one of those large fish that you have to put on the back of the horse. So I was very excited. It was a thrilling back and forth. And then I went to go catch another one, and she said, are you really just going to keep fishing? And I was like, don't tell me how to play my game. I'll just go hunting. I'll play Texas Hold'em poker in that game with a glass of whiskey, like I'm at a bar for an hour and a half. Just goes by, and I refuse to stop playing.
That's how you do it, man. Speaking of Red Dead Redemption 2, IGN, I guess for the 30th anniversary of PlayStation, released their top 100 games of like the entire PlayStation era, and Red Dead Redemption 2 was in their top. It was definitely in their top 10. I don't know. I forget if it was a top 5 game, but it was definitely up there. So it's definitely gotten its recognition from pretty much all sectors.
It's just, there's just so much to do. Like, I love the horse riding. You know, I try to replay Skyrim. The remaster is pretty good. I downloaded that a while ago. But Skyrim's another game where I played to level 84, and I would just kind of go and like when my wife found out that there was fast travel, let's just say she was very upset with me because there were times where I was like, I just gotta travel, I just gotta get to Markov, and she'd be like, oh, all right, how far is that? And I'd show her the map, and she's like, okay, and it would be like 25 minutes, and it was because I didn't want to miss anything along the way.
Well, that's the fun part about Skyrim is that there's so many little areas that like you can just travel to and unlock on the map that, you know, just heightens your gameplay because as soon as you unlock that, there's either like a little dungeon in there or there's something like a chest within a tower or something. I love Skyrim, man. I can't wait for Elder Scrolls to... I just want to poke Elder Scrolls with a stick and be like, do something. Come on.
Well, yeah, Bethesda is just... They had released that little teaser just to like kind of appease the appetite, but like now people are like definitely hungry for more Elder Scrolls. But dude, like Red Dead Redemption by far is like one of the most beautiful games that I have seen in a long time. And like, I mean, outside of Square Enix, and Square Enix makes some really beautiful games, but like Rockstar killed it. Like, I mean, on like Red Dead Redemption 2 looks better than any of the GTA games that they have come out with. Any of the other games that they have come out with. Like, just the landscapes and just the attention to detail and, like, just a lot of small stuff that they have done. You know, it's been a while since I've revisited Red Dead Redemption 2, but I would definitely go back, you know, shoot. But I think that Overwatch 2 might be taking a little bit of a back burner because Rivals is finally releasing tomorrow. Marvel Rivals. The, you know, Overwatch clone.
Okay, well, I guess next week, let us know how the actual release goes for, you know, I guess the first week of release, right?
Yes. Well, you know, I'll probably shoot you in text and whatnot, but we'll talk a little bit more about it next week in depth.
So we're entering, we're like 27 minutes into our actual recording. By the time that you listen to this, friends, it'll be probably closer to like 24, 25 minutes. But we should probably get into our discussion of the first 4 episodes of season 2 of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, the biggest show on Amazon Prime Video. We have a lot to talk about.
Yes.
So much happens in each episode, and I think maybe we should talk a little bit about our expectations going into this season, how they were met, how they weren't, what we were surprised by, before we get into any real big spoilers, because there will be big spoilers in this discussion. Anthony, how about you start the discussion off? What were you expecting going into this second season, and how has the first 4 episodes, how have you like accepted the first 4 episodes?
Well, coming into this season, you know, we got that reveal of Sauron, you know, at the end of season 1. And it ends with him arriving to Mordor. So we're like, okay, you know, his plans are starting to kind of like come together. And so like I knew that there was a lot, we were going to start seeing a lot more of him being the cunning individual that we started to see towards the end of season 1. And, you know, obviously we also ended with the 3 elven rings being made at the end of season 1, and so like I was expecting to see more of the rings, and you know, kind of like a little bit of like what you talked about, that you're like, okay, we got the elven rings, and so we're gonna probably start seeing a little bit some of these other rings being made. So like my expectations were kind of like that too, and you know, it's kind of tracking in that kind of way. And so yeah, so far like last season was really good, but like this one has like really been blowing my mind. Like it's just blowing a lot out of the water. I feel like there was a lot that they took from the first season and they learned, and then they like really like applied to this season.
Rich, how do you feel? I know you feel very vindicated in the fact that we're finally understanding the scope of what this series is capable of. But what do you feel as far as like getting to these episodes and finally getting to discuss them?
I'm just like super excited. You know, the thing is, I think this demonstrates in some way I don't know if there were pratfalls in the first season, right? I'm trying to kind of look at this in a way that doesn't kind of punish them if what they are doing is taking creative license to say, this is what we wanted to do in the first season, and this is how we're going to reveal it in the second season. Because there are many storylines that start to develop. I think characters make more sense. They're less like caricatures. I feel like I'm with people now, right? Not like just kind of weird one-note characters. I'm way more invested. I care more. And everything that I learned in season 2 makes me care more about season 1, which is frustrating. You know, but is that just Amazon saying, you know, or the creators going, we know this is funded. We don't have to worry about pacing the story to make sure that the network continues to fund this. Like, this is going to happen.
Well, that's an interesting thought, and I'll stop you there really quickly, and I'll just kind of address what my thoughts are on that. As soon as you give characters something else to do, and their new task or their new dilemma is kind of built on top of the struggles that they experienced previously, and you can feel that tangibly, then they start feeling like real people instead of the caricatures that you have developed a one-note story for. And I felt that with Isildur this season. I felt that with the Stranger this season. Nori, for sure. You know, pretty much every returning character that has been given a new task this season, I felt stronger for, because they have that history that is building up their story. But yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And as far as what you were saying with season 1 not necessarily delivering on, you know, all the expectations that you felt it should have or whatever, you know, and you mentioned like a lot of stories don't develop until they're given the time to develop. And, you know, we were just talking about Avatar, for instance. The first season of Avatar isn't its strongest season. It's probably the weakest of the 3 seasons of Avatar. But you need that season for the following 2 seasons to develop into something truly great. So maybe that's a case for Rings of Power.
Those developmental seasons are really just like tough, man. You know, especially you have a show that's only 8 episodes. And like, so you only have 8 episodes to develop, to introduce characters, show them what they're about, and develop at least them somewhat so that you can be invested into that character to want to even go into a second season, you know?
Yeah. So, and I think that that's kind of where I'm at with these first couple episodes, is that I wanted to like the first season a lot more than I did. And I finally did, you know, I admitted last episode that I liked where this story was going by the last couple episodes. I think it was by episode 6 or 7, I was just like, finally, I get this. It feels like a fantasy story that I want to be involved with, and I'm all in. And I'm glad that I stuck with it, because I'm all in. The season is what I wanted. You know, it's expanding Middle Earth and the wider realm of Middle Earth in a way that I did not expect. I'm excited with what they're doing with the rune. I'm excited with the just, you know, they're giving us barrow wights. They're giving us Entwives. They're giving us a whole bunch of stuff that is like key to Tolkien.
Yeah.
And I'm super, super stoked. Yeah. So I, for one, I'm super happy.
I like that you had, you know, spoken about what they're doing with Rune, which I thought was like really cool, because something that was like introduced, or like a group of people that were introduced in the Lord of the Rings films, I don't think that they were really talked about in the books. I mean, I could be wrong, I don't remember. But like, you know, the Easterlings, you know, I thought that they looked so cool. But then like after you see them at the Black Gate, you don't see them ever again. And so, like, here we are in their lands, you know? We're seeing, like, the precursor to those Easterlings that we see in the movies. And that's a really good point. So cool. I'm like, dude, like, I'm actually, like, glad that we're getting to see this land that is different. Like, all these different places, like Numenor. You guys talked about the caricatures. They're still a little, they're not my favorite. You know,
yeah, they're not my favorite either. Still, yeah,
you know, they're still very
I'm interested. I'm interested in what's going on over there, but it's not my tea.
They're kind of they're a bit pretentious, you know.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot that's going on. But yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I feel like Isildur is definitely, there's definitely growth. I really do like The Stranger. I did pick up that they're trying to figure out a name for him. So I think you and I are right, Dakota. I'm pretty sure that is going to be Gandalf.
What's interesting, my wife, she noticed something in like the way that they were talking. Whenever they were talking about like the stranger needed a stick, they would call it a Gand, Gand, which is the first four letters of Gandalf's name.
Oh, I did. Yeah, they did say that. You're right.
I didn't pick it up the first time I watched it. I rewatched the first two episodes with her the other day, and yeah, she picked it up immediately. So.
Nice.
It's looking more and more like our favorite, Ishtar wizard is going to be showing up very soon, or is already showing up. So
Rich,
that is cool.
Rich is in the background, like itching because he probably knows the answer.
Oh, he doesn't know anything.
Just keep it safe. I mean, listen, it could be.
See?
I still think Radagast is a good option.
Yeah, no,
this guy gets some mushrooms and maybe he just becomes a different person.
It's like, I mean, yeah, it's possible. I mean, like for me, the biggest thing is just like the personality is like very much so Gandalf, and like now that like Poppy popped back into this season, he's just like having so much of this. He's spending so much time with halflings that like now if this is Gandalf, I'm gonna understand even more why he likes the halflings, because of all this time he's spending, like he sees the courage in their hearts, like, hey, look, they might be small, but they've got a lot. And I mean, honestly, by the end of the Lord of the Rings, like, let's be real, like a lot of people, even like with the whole Aragorn, like you bow to no one. And they're halflings, dude. Like, come on, man.
I think that might be my favorite scene in any movie. I'm just going to put it out there. You bow to no one brings me to tears every single time I see it. It's probably the most powerful scene in all of cinema, just because, just watching this show, you see these Harfoots who the rest of the world has no idea even exist. The dwarves don't know. The elves don't know. The humans don't know. And that's basically what the hobbits are. And the hobbits just kind of like hole themselves up in a hill, and that's their lives for 1,000+ years. But the fact that they become such a huge and incremental, or not incremental, but instrumental part of the story of Middle Earth and the Third Age, it's glorious. It's beautiful.
I can't believe that you do not consider Evangeline Lilly crying when Fili dies in the Hobbit movie, The Desolation of Smaug, I believe. That's the one that makes me cry the most in the series. I mean, obviously, the Hobbits are very well made movies. You guys have to agree with that, right?
I agree that they're well made. They're not my cup of tea. I'm gonna stick to that story.
Yeah. Dakota and I have like talked about that before. To each their own.
Yeah, I don't want to. I do want to give those movies a second chance.
We can cover them too. I mean,
I don't think that they're bad movies. I don't think I've ever considered them bad movies. But next to, it's like this massive religious text that has like withstood the test of time, and then someone copying it. Like, it's a good movie, a good series of movies even. But it's just not the original Lord of the Rings by any stretch of the imagination. And I think it's, for whatever reason, I think the original Lord of the Rings movies were, they captured lightning in a bottle. I don't know how they did it 3 times in a row, but they did it. And yeah, I can't really I don't know what it is about those movies that makes them, for me, that much more profound than the original. I guess it's like original Star Wars trilogy fans watching the prequels. Maybe.
Yeah. And honestly, they probably weren't the most like perfect movies. There's things that you could probably nitpick, but I agree. But look, there's a reason why we got movies like The Hobbit, and then we got this TV show, The Rings of Power. There's a following there. There's a lot of people that want to see this visual Lord of the Rings media, like Star Wars.
Yeah, no, 100%. And in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to have another Lord of the Rings film on our hands, The War of the Rohirrim, which takes place like 183 years before the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So I'm hyped for that. So yeah,
I'm just angry that I have to go like we have a very small movie theater over here by the house, and it just whatever movie we want to see, it plays it. So this is my first encounter that I'm gonna have to, and it's not a big trip. I mean, I have to go a little bit further to New Rochelle to the theater there, but I'm a little upset that it's not in my secret little theater that like only people in basically America go to. Yeah, that's like we're used to like maybe max 14 rows, like most of the theaters when we go.
Yeah.
If there are 10 people, like when we go, it's a shock. It's like, what?
This is very limited release, this one.
Yeah. I'm a little upset because I've been very hyped about it. So I'm going to try to swing it as my son's birthday is 2 days before. So,
nice.
And he's reading The Hobbit like at nighttime. My wife they've been reading The Hobbit together before bed. So he's watched the entire trilogy. He's reading The Hobbit. I think I can swing being like, we got to go see the movie for him. It's his birthday.
The Hobbit is such a good book for kids. I don't know. I remember reading it when I was in elementary and then in middle school. It's such a great read for that.
Yeah, yeah. That was my first read before actually diving into the Lord of the Rings, because the Lord of the Rings is very, very extensive. It's not as heavy as something from Brandon Sanderson, but still.
What I would say, we're going off on a crazy tangent right now. What I will say about Brandon Sanderson versus Tolkien is that Brandon Sanderson is the easier read. It's a larger book, but it's the easier read by a long shot. It's just way more consumable. Tolkien is very heavy lore-wise, very heavy in description and making sure you understand minute details. So yeah, there's a little bit of a difference, but let's
yes
forget War of the Rohirrim, forget The Hobbit, forget Lord of the Rings. Let's talk about Rings of Power. Let's start with we were already talking about Rune. We were already talking about the stranger, quote unquote, that we think is Gandalf maybe, or Radagast, according to Rich. Let's talk a little bit about that storyline for the time being. You mentioned that Poppy comes back. And she comes back and she basically says something along the lines of, you guys haven't really gotten very far. And the stranger that might be Gandalf says, well, we've been lost, or something like that. And Poppy basically says, well, you won't be for long, because look, if you just follow the lyrics to this song that we've been singing for thousands of years, you'll find your way really quickly. And I loved that moment so much, because in the first season, I think that might be my favorite scene in the entirety of it, is the walking song where Nori sings, or I think it's Poppy singing the walking song as the Harfoots travel across the land. It's just such a pleasant tune. It's mixed in with some actual Tolkien verses. And now that this show has a second season and it's incorporated it into the plot, we have some actual reason for it existing, and I think that that's awesome.
Yeah it's not random. It's not just some sort of nursery rhyme type thing that it's not as goofy as it might come off right off the rip. There's a reasoning behind it. I agree.
Yeah. I the only thing that for me was a little weird, and if you watch it, if you're so I rewatched the first season before I started season 2 again, right? So you have this very emotional, right, Nori goodbye she's leaving everything she knows behind, right? And then it's okay, so we've got, so we're back to Nori and the stranger. Oh, wait a minute, but Poppy's back. And I was like, what? And I get it, and I'm happy. I love that she's there, right? It's like Frodo without his Sam, he needs his Sam. And Nori needs her Poppy, but I don't know. It took away from it.
There's a couple moments in this second season where I can tell they're rewriting the first season a little bit, or overwriting the ending of the first season to get the characters where they want them. The biggest for me, outside of Poppy, showing up with Nori, is Sauron. You know, at the end of season 1, we see him go like stroll on into Mordor, newly christened Mordor, and he's got this smile on his face. And at the start of the second season, he gets kidnapped, and he's just like, actually, where I need to be is right where I left at the end of season 1. So I got to go right back over there, guys. I'll be right back. I'm going to tell you all about this guy, Sauron, that's come back. So that's obviously like a plot contrivance in the sense that they probably had to figure out a reason for him to show up to Mordor and then go right back to Celebrimbor. Yeah, it's a little bit awkward, but you know, it's obviously not something that would naturally happen to a character. You know, like you personally wouldn't. You know, I'm gonna make a trip to California to start a new life. Actually, now that I'm in California, I forgot I really got to do this one thing that, you know, I should have done back home in New York. So
and I don't look, the Harfoots. See, here's what I don't get. All right, so
yeah,
right before she leaves, they're basically like, okay, we don't really do adventures and going outside in the world, but it's clear that somehow you're different, Nori. You're meant for this, right? And it's dangerous. But the Harfoots saying, since he's with her, the stranger, Radagast, we'll call him. Since Radagast is with her, they know that she's going to be okay, right? And that's why they're okay with her leaving with him. What was the I just need to know, like back at the Harfoot camp, Poppy's like, so I'm going to go too. And they're like, wait, you're going to leave alone? Yeah. Are you sure about this? Like, you're going to travel alone and nobody's going to escort you? We're just going to trust that you'll find them? Like, is she a tracker? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, no. She hasn't shown any of those skills, I think, in the first season. If anything, all the tracking skills were Nori's. And Poppy just kind of bumbled about a little bit during the first season. So it is interesting, this new development on her end, but... Yeah, it's one of those things.
Poppy was the one that had that tracking, you know, skills all along. You know, we just thought it was Nori. So something that I wanted to talk a little bit about. I mean, I don't know if you were ready to pivot, but we got a recasting. Adar, like one of the biggest, like one of the big bads of this show got recasted.
Do we have a reason why? I didn't actually look up.
So I did look it up. I don't know. You can say, Rich.
Oh wait, I think you might be a little fresher. I know that was played by the same actor who was Benjen Stark, and I think he was doing another project. Like he got wrapped up in another project, but I might be wrong on that. I just know that I don't think it was anything like somebody did something wrong, but he just wasn't available.
So I did look a little bit into it, and yeah, pretty much the gist of it is that he was looking to like kind of expand his horizon and move into other projects. I guess he didn't want to get like lumped up into this long term and I don't know, get typecasted or whatnot, but I don't know, like to me I'd be like, okay, I'm doing something that's Lord of the Rings, so unless I die in this first season, I'm gonna be expected to like, you know, like to me, like if you make that commitment, unless you can't for whatever reason, you know, I don't know, pay discrepancy, life stuff,
health,
you know, or
family,
health,
know, like actual like big stuff,
or if you genuinely had a project that like you're like, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna be moving on to this, you know. But for me, that's like quitting a really good job for like no reason, you know.
This guy played for
whatever it is, you know. I wish him good fortune. You know, I hope he finds the success that he's looking for, you know, and whatever other projects he wants.
Yeah,
I don't wish him anything.
Yeah, I don't. Oh no, I don't want to be a part of another multi-million-dollar franchise that everybody is watching. Please, I was already in Game of Thrones. What a terrible experience. But we did get a replacement. I don't even just mean by in terms of the actor for Adar, but we got another actor from Game of Thrones, because the Dark Wizard is played by none other than Mance Rayder from The King Beyond the Wall in Game of Thrones. So we lost one, but we got another one back.
Wait a minute.
And then like I mean I guess and then in a way there is also
You're right.
I mean you're right about like the whole like recasting thing too, because Sauron, he transitions into somebody else too.
Okay, yeah, we're talking about so many different things right now. We gotta lock in.
No, well, I mean, no, but we're in the light of recasting, so we're not talking
Yeah.
about
So
like anything deep. But yeah,
so Adar was definitely recast. I like this new actor. I do think it is, coming directly off of season 1. It is a little bit strange for me.
right. It was a little bit odd. Like I was like, I don't think that's the same person.
I'm not sure. At first, I thought it was, like this is Adar when he's younger, because the scene takes place like, thousands of years or like 1,000 years prior.
Oh yeah,
to like
that's
the modern
what happened
day.
to me too. I was like, why would they do that? He looks so different just to stay younger, and then it flashed back, and I'm like, wait a minute, he looks the same. What's happening? And I'm watching it in a vacuum. Like I feel like like you just said at one point, because of House of the Dragon, there was like not a lot of chatter about this show other than negativity. And then season 2 started and there wasn't a lot of great fanfare. So I'm just sitting there like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we thought that maybe it was like a CGI de-aging type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I was thinking the same thing. I was like, okay. Like I was like, why does he look weird? I was like, oh, okay, this is in the past. Okay, so maybe he's younger. And then, like when you flash forward to the future, it's the same person. And you're like, okay.
So, Rich, you mentioned that the actor that played Mance Rayder in Game of Thrones, his name is Kieran Hines, is also the actor that plays the Dark Wizard in Rune, the new land that we enter in. For me, I recognize this actor first and foremost as playing Julius Caesar in the 2-season Rome show from HBO. But yeah, no, I'm looking it up. He's definitely Mance Rayder. That's definitely him. I liked what I saw of the Dark Wizard. We know that he's in search of this Ishtar that's come to Earth. He's also in search of Sauron. So he's trying to, I don't know what he's trying to do. He's trying to get as much power as possible. We don't know enough about him yet, but what do you guys think about that character?
I think he's really... All right, so how do I do this? My initial thought is the possibility of the blue wizards that we never hear about right? Those are the wizards that go to the east. Is it they go to the east and they're like not seen from or not heard from again?
Correct. Yeah, I believe it's the east. There's 2 wizards that are never named in Tolkien lore that are the blue wizards. We don't know anything about them yet, lore-wise. I don't know if the show's going to bring that up or what.
But
yeah, we have no idea.
Dude, they just didn't want anything to do with all the malarkey that was happening in Middle Earth.
Yeah, I'm right with them.
They're like, they're like, man, I came down here for this, man. I'm out of here.
So one of the acolytes that the Dark Wizard, had sent forth to collect the stranger, as we'll call him here, is brought back to life through the power of moths and blood magic. But it's kind of cool seeing a familiar face. I think they made the character less androgynous. In the first season, it wasn't really clear if it was a male or female character. I think they added a little bit more makeup to make it a more feminine character in this instance. But it's an interesting look for the... I don't know. It's an interesting look. But it's cool seeing that character, who's very creepy, back.
Speaking of the stranger, it seems like he's starting to like use his powers a bit more. Like he's starting to understand a little bit more. But yeah, he definitely needs his Gans, I guess, to help channel that ability.
In his dream, I don't know if you noticed, in his dream that he had when he, like, looking underneath the stars in Rune, he sees a staff that's kind of like just out of reach in terms of like this realm of reality or whatever he's in. But it keeps shifting from one staff to another. And it's the curved staff that he picks up by the well that he tries to channel that sandstorm with. And it goes totally awry, and the staff that he picks up, disintegrates. So clearly that isn't the staff that he's meant to have.
Yeah.
I like it. It reminds me of different franchise, but just the idea of like Jedi having to make their own lightsabers and get their own kyber crystals. Just like the hero having to make to kind of get the right weapon, like Legend of Zelda and Link needing to get the Master Sword type. Even obviously, I guess now King Arthur back getting it's probably the original kind of inspiration, but I love it.
The stranger meets an interesting character in Tom Bombadil.
Probably the most interesting character in Tolkien lore. Tom Bombadil. I don't know. I've gone down this rabbit hole trying to figure out who the heck Tom Bombadil is, but he's a literal character who is older than the world itself, basically. Like, he's existed since the beginning. He's kind of like the firstborn of existence within this physical realm. He has powers of creation and powers over creation that we cannot fathom as viewers and readers. But he's this bumbling guy who just exists, and he has no real care for the world at large. He doesn't have any stake in the War of the Rings and all that. But I'm happy that they brought Tom Bombadil in, because that's probably the biggest mistake of the Lord of the Rings films, is not trying to tackle that character.
There was something interesting that he had said. So the stranger, he's trying to grab this branch, and it happens to be a limb to an ent. And so he gets pulled into this tree, and then Tom saves him. And something that he says that is very interesting is like, you shouldn't be awake. And then he said this line like, eat dirt, drink water, something. And I'm like, dude, Treebeard said that same exact thing.
Yeah, it's cool.
Nice.
It's cool.
I was like, what? I was like, is that just like a saying that Ents say?
Yeah, no, good call. I was thinking that was very familiar, but yeah, you're totally right. In the extended editions, if you watch the films, in the extended editions, when Mary and Pippin are like kind of sucked into those trees, Treebeard is the one who's like, he lets them out, and he says that very same line. So very cool. Yeah, that's a really good callback.
Yeah, that was a really cool line. I was like, man.
One thing that's worth talking about with Tom Bombadil is, in the book, in The Lord of the Rings anyway, he's married to, or I don't know if he's married, but his significant other is a person called Goldberry. She's supposedly like a serious babe with a golden voice. But in this show, it's interesting. They don't really show her, but we hear her voice. We hear her voice in the other room. And when the stranger asks if there's anyone else in the house, Tom Bombadil's just like, well, you're here.
Yeah, that was funny.
So I'm curious about that, and I'm very, very curious about that. Yeah, Rich, what are your thoughts on Tom?
I mean, I think it was great. They had to like move some things around. I'm kind of gonna skip slightly here, but you have later on you have the Barrow Wights, and Tom's actually in the book, if I remember correctly, Bombadil saves Frodo and them from the Barrow Wights. So they kind of had to piecemeal a little bit some of the stuff he does, but
yeah, they introduced stuff from the books that weren't included in the movies in interesting and unique ways for the current plot. And I totally appreciate that. I think that that's a really good way to, tell these new stories that you're trying to tell, while also incorporating Tolkien lore that, you didn't really get with the films.
And I think what they did really well was, it could be really tough to introduce a character and have to kind of like fast exposition them, right? So, you're talking about how he's like immortal and he doesn't really care. It's just that it's not that he doesn't care. It's like us being upset if like an anthill gets knocked over, like we just carry on with our day. So I think they managed to really, in these 4 episodes, right, really show us, like, he's just kind of absent-minded. He's like, oh, yeah, I was here before stars, I was here before the first rate, like, I really love that kind of, the way they pulled that off. And I think my favorite thing that they did with him was when he breathed in deeply by the fire, and the fire, like it's like he's a bellows almost. He, like, stoked the fire, like...
Oh, yeah.
It was just a little tiny thing, but I think that it went such a long way in demonstrating how powerful he is. Because if not, the other stuff is just words. And to be fair, we heard Halbrand say words, and he ended up being very tricksy and very false, right? So they had to kind of do something, and it's nice to actually have them demonstrate that. I thought that was really effective.
Yeah, so let's pivot a little bit. We were talking about recasts. One character that did not get a recast was Bronwyn.
Yeah.
That was a surprise for me. I did not see that coming, because at the end of season 1, and even why can't I remember this elf's name every single episode? Arondir. Arondir even says exactly what I was thinking. Bronwyn seemed like she was getting better at the end of season 1, and then there's a certain foulness to orc arrows that the human flesh doesn't quickly forget, or something along those lines. And I'm just like,
the actual line that's word for word. I was waiting to talk about it because it made me so angry that they just explained it away by like, infections. You know how they can be, right? Like sometimes they get you later on.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a off-screen death between seasons 1 and 2. And like we come to that with her like already like passed away, and then Theo and Arondir have like, Theo has like, he wants nothing to do with Arondir. Like guessing he partially blames Arondir for his mother's death. And I think he blames himself too.
Yeah, I think he blames himself. I mean, there's that part where Isildur is revealing his own issues with his mom, and Theo is like sobbing hysterically.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell that it's a therapeutic moment for him as well. But again, like him blaming Arondir to me was a little, I mean, it was just kind of like typical. Like there's that scene where they're like emptying the pails, and Arondir tries to give him some good advice about kind of the process of grief. And he's like, the only thing that was keeping us together is now ashes, which on the second rewatch, I thought he just meant like just generally like, the way the mountain went up and everything's gone. But then I was like, oh snap, he's talking about his mom. What?
Yeah.
And then he's like, he's not, and you're not my father. And I really want to find out. I so badly want him to actually be Theo's father. Like, it would just burn him. I don't know. I think I'm wrong, but there's a part of me that just wants to be right.
Yeah, no, you're definitely wrong. But
like, come on, like, why? He was so nice.
Dang, Dakota,
he
like,
nice
wow. Striking this man down like that.
I'm not trying to strike down, but it's just like, we know what half elves look like. We have one in the show with Elrond.
Yeah,
but we never say, hey, when have you seen Theo's ears? Show me.
You got a really good point.
Until that boy's hair is moved just once, I'm gonna stick by this theory.
All right. We'll put a stopper on this theory for now.
He said,
but I want to just. I'm still not over the fact that the actress left the show, because I was very confused by it. So I looked it up. The actress, her name is Nazanin Bonyadi. I guess she literally just quit acting. Like, it wasn't even just like a conflict of interest. I guess it was because she wanted to focus more on her activism, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I had looked a little bit into that, and I think it was like something about fighting for rights in Iran or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So more power to her. But yeah, I just thought it was a really strange thing. And also, like, it's kind of weird that they cast, I guess they can't really, they need Adar. They don't need Bronwyn for the story to keep going.
I think it makes, look, obviously I'm not privy to anything. I don't know if at some point she was going to die later, but I think that, especially that scene with Isildur, where he's sitting there sobbing, it doesn't work out the same way. I actually think that it worked really well to their benefit, so that you kind of have now these two motherless,
Oh, so you're suggesting that because the actress left the show, it made this particular season stronger because of the theme of loss. That's an interesting thought. So you mentioned Isildur. He introduces this concept that we didn't know previously, that, and this is knowledge that he alone fully comprehends, is that he went out to swim. He was caught in a riptide. His mother went out to save him and ended up drowning trying to save him. Nobody knows. Obviously, they know that the mother drowned, but they didn't know that it was his fault that the mother drowned. And I thought that was a really interesting little concept there. That was a nice scene from Isildur.
I'm pretty sure that the reason she drowned was the water in her lungs and not Isildur. But that's just me, you know. I think he's really given himself a lot of power when he's like, you know, it was my fault. No, it was the riptide. It's the water. Also, you guys are from Numenor, so it's a little sad that your mom wasn't a better swimmer. They're just...
You know... Rich, you're totally right. I my mistake. Yeah, you're right. Usually, water is what drowns people. So
preaching to the choir, man.
It's just like if Namor the Submariner drowned, right? And you'd be like, what? But you know, you're Namor.
Should we touch on Numenor, or should we finish with that subplot with Theo? And yeah, let's continue with Theo and all that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot that happens in that, because you know we've got now like the wild people. And there is the introduction of, what's her name?
Ingrid. Istrid.
Ingrid. Estrid. You're literally thinking about Ingrid from Beyond Beyond the Wall in Game of Thrones. It's kind of the same character, to be honest.
I mean, excuse me, Ingrid has red hair, okay? And Estrid has black hair. Okay?
Definitely.
Very different.
No, yeah,
okay?
You're right. Yeah, no. My mistake.
It's ridiculously.
I'm all over the place today. I'm sorry.
I think that she's supposed to be like the strong female character, like for that group of people, in a way, like not really to replace Bronwyn, but like to kind of like bring back, I guess, like the female energy to that group. But yeah, no, well, she's like a wild person though, you know. She's part of that group that serves Adar. And I guess, I don't know, like, so, I mean, from what I'm gathering is that she started to have like a change of heart, but she said that like a lot of people, or they said that a lot of them, like when they get caught, they burn like whatever the mark of Adar, so that they wouldn't be caught. But like now people are kind of like caught up, like, oh, this is what they're doing. So, like, did she do it to hide, or did she do it because she has a change of heart?
That's a really good question. And I think, to be honest, I think that her total connection to Adar was survivalist. You know, I think maybe she and her fiance, her betrothed, saw that, you know, to exist in the South as they were, they needed to show fealty to the guy in charge. And they saw that as Adar, and they got the brand. Whether or not she is a good or bad person, I think, you know, there's always room to debate with that. There's always room to repent and change with that.
Yeah.
And I think that she makes the right moves in trying to save Isildur and Arondir when they get sucked into that sandpit / worm monster thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. So they do that while they're tracking down Theo, because Theo gets like kidnapped by Ents. And you know that like little prison that they put that Theo was put in with the other people, that kind of reminded me of like that like trap / basket that the aliens had in War of the Worlds. Yeah.
No way. I was thinking the same thing.
Dude, it was like high up, dude, like
I could not believe that we were thinking about literally the exact same thing. That's hilarious.
I love the shot. I thought, like, so even before we get to see the cage, right, the way the episode ends when the Ent grabs Theo, I mean, it's so nerd fulfilling, right? Because it doesn't show you the end, right? But all you get is a kind of a change in camera angle. You get Theo's reaction.
Yes.
And then you hear the creaking, right? Like the tree beard walking. And
you know
it's so satisfying. Like, that's a way to end the show on a cliffhanger. That's not a cliffhanger if you're nerdy enough to know the sound. And it's just, I remember, like, I recognize I recognize sounds of the animals in Red Dead now. I'm like, oh, there's a raccoon, and I jump off the horse to go get it. And like, my wife's like, how did you learn that? And I was like, it's a level of nerddom that you just, when you reach, it's so fulfilling.
Well, what would you have done if it cut to the next episode and it was that hill troll?
Honestly, I would have been so furious because
it would have been like, wait, say what? That sounded like a tree.
So I think the best word for like how Theo is like picked up off the ground is not kidnapped, not stolen. He was literally absconded. Like he was just like scoop.
Literally picked up with the rest of with those like wild people because Isildur was trying to save his horse.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
and it was interesting. Like they did that because I think because they saw the weapons and they thought that they were axes.
Yeah. So even like the swords they assumed were axes.
Which I mean, honestly, like your tree.
Be, yeah.
I mean, it's a sharp looking edge. So
very cool. Speaking of the Ents, we have our first look ever at a live action / CGI project of an Entwife.
Yeah.
Not just an Ent, but an Entwife, which, by the time of Lord of the Rings, several thousand years in the future, they don't, not that they don't exist, but the Ents have lost them.
Dude.
Just lost.
That one always made me laugh. Oh, I'm sorry. How did they die? We just lost them.
it's like they went to the mall together, right?
Can't find them.
And they said like, "Oh, hey, we're just gonna go to this store for a second. We'll meet you at the other store." And they got lost.
They all went to the bathroom together, and by the time we picked up the check, they were gone.
It just also,
I thought that was funny.
It gives me. It does gives me like some questions. So do the Ents? It seems like now they're not together either, right? So like, do the Ent wives and Ents have to travel in separate packs? Like, can they never be together? That's a really tough long distance relationships. I don't know if you guys know are very difficult. So
extremely,
and they can't even talk to each other.
All right, so we've talked about the rune side of things. We've talked about the Southlands / Mordor. So what I thought was really funny was there was a character, in the humans' camp, like in the camp with Theo and Arondir when they were burning the pyre of Bronwyn. Shortly thereafter, someone says, someone mentions Mordor, and I'm thinking, I forget if it was Estrid or not, but someone mentions Mordor, and I'm thinking, how the heck would anyone in this group know what Mordor is? Because no one has ever mentioned this out loud before in this show. It was previously the Southlands until like a subtitle on the screen changed from Southlands to Mordor. So like, how would anyone know that this place is called Mordor now?
I mean, unless they had a running in with orcs that were...
They probably have. Yeah, it's been a bit. Yeah.
I mean, something off screen.
Whoa, listen. All right, Anthony, I gotta confront you about something, okay? The reason that Dar says that he wants to be referred to as Uruk is because that's the way it's pronounced in the Black speech. Black speech. All right? So it's like you going to Mexico City and being like, I want quiero avocado. Nope. It's aguacate, man. All right? So basically, the Uruks just don't, they like call us by the way we say it, all right? We're not Chinese Taipei. We're Myanmar, like they want to own their name.
Oh.
They like literally refer to themselves as orcs, though.
Yeah, the actual orcs do refer to
themselves
as orcs. They're the commoners. Right?
I mean, that, was it the thing, it would be valid if if you had like a Mexican, I was like, avocado instead of avocate. But yeah, no, we didn't. Oh, I mean, we kind of glossed over it. I mean, I don't know if you're like ready, but like, there's the whole Sauron and Celebrimbor.
Oh yeah, we should definitely talk about that. Well, really quickly, I want to talk a little bit about. I feel like this is going to be a 2-hour episode. I'm already looking at it now.
No, it'll be less, but I mean, like, this is jam packed. So
yeah, there's a great scene in the beginning where they show like the dawn of the Second Age, where Sauron like first tries to take over the Furrodraith, which is like the land up north where the orcs like lost their last battle, and like they kind of eventually kill him, and he turns into like a goop monster.
Oh yeah.
That's a fascinating scene. And I was very confused the first time I watched it. I had to watch it a second time to understand like the time passage between when he was killed and when he came back as Halbrand. Because there is a time period of almost 1,000 years that passes. So one thing that's really clever, and you have to really be paying attention, is when they show like the goop like going down into the cave and into that little puddle, and then it like zooms out. And then it's like, you know, it shows you what the cave looks like. And then it fades to black. And then it fades, you know, back into the cave. And then it zooms back into the goop. But if you look at what the cave looks like zoomed out both times, in the first scene, the stalagmites and the stalactites are a lot smaller. And in the second scene, like they're literally seconds apart, the stalagmites have grown like several feet. So it's clear that like many hundreds of years have passed in this cave system, that he's just been sitting in this pool of goop. I thought that was a really cool feature. Muck. Yeah, he was just muck. He was noodles in a pond. I thought that was cool. But all right, we should really like move on. So he makes his way over to Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor has been told by Galadriel, do not treat with this dude. Do not let him in. Do not have any more dealings with him. Especially do not make more rings with this guy. And, you know, he just kind of stands outside for a couple days waiting for Celebrimbor to, like, show pity on him, blah, blah, blah. What I love about Sauron this season is that we find... Rich mentioned it last couple episodes. His story makes so much more sense going forward because he plays off of everyone that he's with. He wants everyone that he's with to feel like they're doing everything that they can for him. And that's such an interesting concept to me. When he was with Galadriel, you know, he played on the fact that Galadriel needed a savior figure to show up to help take her perceived notion of what Sauron was down, you know, in the Southlands. He played that character to a T. With Celebrimbor, I'm fascinated by what he's doing with Celebrimbor, because it's very biblical in the sense that the biblical account refers to the devil figure, Satan, as someone who will make themselves into an angel of light to deceive you into believing something or to doing something. That's something that the Bible talks about. So with Tolkien, who was very biblically minded, he was a Catholic. He was very biblically minded. He's always thinking about these things. He made Sauron into that figure in a sense where he made himself into an angel of light. And literally Anatar is the Lord of Gifts. And Celebrimbor, being a smith, like one of the highest smiths of all, would have greatly appreciated the presence of this Lord of Gifts, this angel of gifts, basically. And that's exactly who Sauron makes himself out to be, this angel of light, basically. He's the Lord of Gifts.
Yeah.
I'm helping everyone in Middle-earth. And it's the most amazing twist. And it's something that I have been thinking about since I was a kid. How did Sauron, who has been bad for well past the creation of the rings, how did he convince the elves, the dwarves, the men, everyone to put rings on his fingers, you know, if he was giving them, you know, like how did the evil guy convince everyone that this is a good thing to put on your finger to like fix your people? And this totally makes sense.
Right.
You know, he plays that angle so well.
And like pretty much the way that like he's going to be like kind of playing Adar against like, you know, the elves and, you know, like he's like really just like playing everybody like a fiddle. And you see him like masterminding this stuff over time, and it yeah, you're right, it makes so much sense because we're so used to seeing Sauron as this like big kind of hulking in the black armor and the black helmet, like, you know, just imposing individual. So to see him as this deceiver, somebody that can actually get along with anybody and deceive them, and yeah, like you said, play to whatever it is that they need, that it makes so much more sense. Yeah, like that he was able to deceive all of these people.
Yeah, I'm really.
You see, like what he's doing with the dwarves.
I was blown away. Oh, let's talk a little bit about the dwarves. Or unless, Rich, you had something to say about Anatar and Sauron.
I mean,
and
you
all
guys
that.
touched most of it. I mean, yeah, I mean, it was great to see the way his machinations are working out. Previously I just had to imagine in my head that he went up to them and just played single ladies over and over again until they were like, "Oh, we gotta put a ring on it." So they finally did. But now and I loved the passage of time. I loved how the ooze took over a rat and came out and then took over a woman and a carrot. Like, I just loved the evolution of the entire thing. I think the only thing I would say is, like, unlike you guys, like, my confusion so much, just like Adar, the recasting, I didn't look it up. So I'm just watching it. I'm not looking on social media, so I don't know what I'm like, what? And then Bronwyn just being gone, I'm like, what? So I was a little, I think when we got to that Sauron part, it kind of stabilized me a little bit, because I was like, okay, I'm getting more backstory on this guy. This is working. And I really, like I said before, it's kind of just the realization of full people, right? Or characters, because of this extra stuff that we're getting. So it just makes it so much juicier.
Totally, yeah. Yep. No, I totally agree. We have to jump over to the dwarves and their current plight, because something interesting is happening. One thing that happened to the elves in the first season was that the light of their trees was fading. The leaves were falling from their trees that were saplings of the great trees from Valinor. And basically the light of the Eldar was fading. The Eldar being like their literal life force,
Yeah.
Like they needed to go back to Valinor to, live out the rest of their days there instead of Middle Earth, because they were losing their ability to do so in Middle Earth with the tree fading. I always like the tree as they're almost like symbolic representation of their own life. But yeah, so with the rings, their problem was fixed with the mithril that was created with one of the powers of the Silmarils from like the First Age. The mithril that was embedded in that mountain was able to, in conjunction with the ring and somehow Sauron's power, they were able to fix whatever was going on that was poisoning their trees in the light of the Eldar. I like that. So with the creation of Mount Doom now being an active volcano, the seismic activity throughout Middle-earth has increased to a point where the people of Khazad-dûm are now in a position where they're receiving aftershocks that are cutting off their light flow, and they are no longer able to grow crops for themselves. And what I like about this, for the first time they show what happens in Khazad-dûm, is that we get a little bit of glimpse of how their light system works and how their irrigation and agricultural system works. I thought that was really cool. And it totally makes sense that without light, they can't grow anything.
Yeah.
You can't grow a plant indoors without light. So, yeah, so I thought that was an interesting concept. And even like Disa, who is one of, I forget what they call them, like mountain singers or something like that. I forget the actual term. I feel like that's not the correct one. But she's not capable of reaching some sort of understanding with the mountain. Even she makes it worse by trying to connect with it through song and reverberation. I thought that was fascinating. And obviously, this is another machination of Sauron, long in the planning process, finally taking shape. And the dwarves now, this season, need the help of Celebrimbor and his rings.
Yeah. So, yeah, like, now that's what I was kind of talking about. Like, it looks like it's kind of tracking. So, I'm feeling that by the end of this season, we're going to be getting the dwarf rings,
I think that's got to be the case, right? I mean, I did see it in the trailers too. Like the dwarf rings do get made.
Okay.
According to the trailers. So yeah, that's definitely happening.
So like, I'm trying to think. There's a lot of stuff that I don't remember. So I know that so eventually we're gonna get to the rings that go to the men, but those 9 rings, or those 9 ring bearers, become ring wraiths, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What happens? I don't think anything really happens to the dwarves or the elves in that kind of sense.
I think so you have to really get into the lore of Tolkien to understand like why they aren't corrupted to the same degree that men are.
Well, I know they say a lot that they're easily corruptible.
It's throughout the entirety of Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
To be fair, that is Galadriel's kind of the recanting of it, right? And elves are, as we know, a little snobbish. They look down on other races a little bit. So I'm actually
that's a really good point. Yeah, keep going.
I want to know, like, I'm excited. Like, look, we talked about it last week where you thought that it's going to be kind of like elves first season, dwarves second season. Kind of like a layout. Like, I want to see what happens when the men get the rings, eventually when that happens. The only thing...
Because that's a huge part of it, like them becoming eventually ring wraiths because they corrupted by them. I think that's a fascinating concept. But you mentioned the elves being a little snobbish in their interpretation of men and other races. And it's interesting because Elrond seems to be the only one who is not enamored by the rings. Everyone who comes in contact with them is, even Círdan, who's like the eldest of the elves on Middle Earth. He was ready to throw the rings out and get rid of them to a point where they could never be found again until he sees them. And he's like, perfection does not exist solely in Valinor. Like, he was totally swayed by the creation of these rings by Celebrimbor and Sauron that he was willing to shove one of them on to his middle finger. It was interesting. They all put it on their middle finger. I don't know if that's.
I did like when they put it on the way it, the kind of recreation of the original shot
of the movie.
I wonder if we do know that Celebrimbor is one of the greatest smiths of or kind of all time. But I wonder.
I like that pronunciation.
I love I'll call it like the super Latino pronunciation of all the stuff. Numenor, Mordor, like I just
anything with an R and an E.
I want to watch it. I haven't done this yet, and I will do it before next episode. I want to watch it I want to watch Lord of the Rings in Spanish just to hear if somehow they roll their R slightly differently. Like.
Rohan.
I'm very, very excited. But I think I wonder, like, does everybody behold these items so much because of Celebrimbor's like skill level, or is it because of the combination with Sauron? But then, if you kind of think forward, we do know from the lore, and if they go by this, that Sauron basically forges the ring alone in Mount Doom. So that one is still is so beholden that everybody calls it precious. So I don't know.
That's a really good point. Yeah, no. So that is something that they need to get right, specifically with the One Ring. We know that the other rings are created with at least the forge that Celebrimbor is the celery bimbo.
Yes, so much better.
What he's got going on, but the One Ring needs to be created in. We got a lot going on there. So as of this point, we know that the dwarves have gotten an invitation from Celebrimbor to join them in Eregion to basically create the 7 rings for the Dwarf Lords.
Yeah.
So very excited to see where that goes. And I think the last plot point that we need to briefly talk about is what happens in Numenor, because they have their own little drama going on. I'm really starting to not like Isildur's sister. Like, I thought she was a cool character in the first season, and this season she seems like, I didn't know you at all, girl. What's going on?
Yeah, she's causing like a lot of drama. There's like this whole power struggle thing going on with the Queen Regent and what was her cousin's name?
Pharazôn.
Yes,
Pharazôn.
You saw the whole instance between, because I don't think he knows that she can't see. I think that they've been kind of keeping that under wraps, and so I think he kind of picked up some.
I think when that woman slapped her and she didn't react prior to being slapped, like, I think at that point people realize, oh, this is a crippled lady.
I actually on rewatch.
I think he was trying to test it though with the whole dress thing.
Oh yeah, but I thought that what
interesting.
I know it's silly, but I don't know why on this rewatch, watching her walk down the steps, I sat there and I thought to myself, how many times did she have to do that to be like, okay, 17 steps, okay, 3 steps, okay? 5 steps forward, turn left, slightly acknowledge Farazan, who might be standing there, and then like right like
yeah, I noticed that too. Like there's that one scene where in her coronation where she knows exactly when to turn towards the throne.
It's impressive.
That was really interesting.
That's dedication to statescraft, statescraft or whatever, to being a leader, right? Is learning how many steps exactly you got to take.
Elenio probably helped her with that too.
Yeah, Elendil definitely helped. But what's fascinating is that we know that her father, the actual king previously, his coronation was attended by an eagle, and that was considered a very auspicious omen. Like this was the sign of a good king. What's funny is that her coronation is also attended by an eagle, but Farazan decides, no, it's my eagle. And I was so pissed. I was like, that guy, I wanted the eagle to just like grab him and throw him off the cliff. Like
he hijacked that eagle.
He's so deliciously I know that he's so almost one note, but there was a moment where when the Palantir is thrown down and he goes, surely that item does not belong to our queen, who would not rely on an elven artifact, right? But he like paused before he said it. It's like he processed and he went, I'm going to take my shot here, right? I'm going to say this, and if she takes ownership, like I've got everyone. And I just thought it was kind of a brilliant like scheme that he pulled, right? Because he couldn't have known that was going to go as it did. I mean, pardon me, that's not right. Because when they were in the tavern, I can't remember Elendil's daughter's name, but she says, I know a secret. And that's when they're interrupted for a second, I think, by Isildur's buddy, whose name also escapes me. But
yeah, to defend the queen. Yeah, I remember that.
So I think that that machination was... So now I have to autocorrect myself. My apologies. I know, you know what, Farazan? I don't think you're as cool as I thought you were before, because I thought you were super smart on the spot. But now I know you had plotted that line and kind of bet that Muriel had touched the Palantir at some point.
Guys, I think we should bring our discussion to a close. But before we close out, what are our final thoughts for the first 4 episodes? Rich, go ahead.
I mean, I couldn't, I've never really watched anything where I felt rewarded for sticking around, right? Like I feel, I watched it right away when it came out and I was, into it, and obviously rewatching way too many movies that I shouldn't have, just to kind of get more insight into it. But it really is something that just got me so excited. And, we'll talk about the next 4 next week, but I'm almost sad because I'm hungry. I want the next part so bad.
You're hungry. How do you, I guess, if you could leave us with like an idea of like a feeling for what we can expect for the coming 4 episodes, like, do you feel like these 4 episodes are a good quality indicator for the next 4, or are we expected to get something totally different from them?
I think we're all going to be big smiles, and I don't know how we keep it under 2 hours next week. I'm going to say that.
Very interesting. Okay, very interesting. All right, Anthony, go ahead. What do you feel about these first 4 episodes of season 2?
So far, it's been good. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. I know that things are bound to get crazier, and yeah, I'm stoked.
Excellent. I also am stoked. I'm excited to see what happens next. I'm thrilled by the way that these first 4 episodes have come together. I'm really excited specifically about the Dwarven plotline. One thing that we didn't really get to touch on is like the continued, I guess, chemistry between Prince Durin and his wife. I feel like those 2 characters have such great chemistry together.
They do.
Hopefully we'll get a lot more opportunity to talk about like what they have to go through going forward. So I'm really excited to talk more about that in the next episode. And guys, thank you so much for listening to us here for our 102nd episode of Project Geekology. Please be sure to find us on all of our socials. You'll find that in the show notes down below. And if you'd like to give us a review, if your podcast application or wherever you're listening allows you to do so, please be sure to give it Wait, well, Anthony, is it 4? No, it's 5 stars, right?
5 juicy stars. Only juicy.
Yeah, you don't want to cut into that turkey and it's just all dry. You know, you want a little bit of juice in there. You want it to be substantial. So hopefully your review in this case is a juicy 5-star review. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you check it out, our next podcast, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, y'all.
Adios. No Wolverines today. No Wolverines today.